Good morning, everyone. I'd like to thank you all for taking the time to join us this morning on our first webinar in this series of webinars that we're looking to conduct over the next few weeks and the first one being on building effective remote teams with Microsoft Teams. So as I mentioned, this is the first event of our webinar series, and we're looking to conduct this off the back of the unprecedented and difficult situation we all find ourselves in at the moment, with self-isolating, where we're trying to encourage collaboration and team working where possible, using the tool sets that people will have at their disposal. So the first event, as we mentioned, is building effective remote teams with Microsoft Teams, and today we're going to give you an overview of what Microsoft Teams is, how it can help with the collaboration and team working capability, and how to build these effective remote teams with the tool sets at your disposal. We're then looking to run another 5 events in this series, one of them on business voice, another on security, the further ones on collaboration, Azure, and automation. And we're looking to run these events every week for the next 6 weeks on a Tuesday morning at 10 AM. We will be keeping a Q&A section for the end of the webinar, and we'll be taking comments within the chat window of this live event within Teams, and we'll be moderating that and kind of accepting questions as part of that. For further info on the events and how to sign up, please visit circleit.co.uk/events. So the agenda for today is that we're going to cover off first and foremost the licensing. A lot of our customers and prospects or people on today's webinar will have licensing that covers them for Microsoft Teams already. For those that don't, there are free trials available from Microsoft for 6 months, and we'll cover that in a little bit more detail. But this is to try and give everybody the tool sets that they need in a modern workplace environment. Then we'll look at giving you an overview of Microsoft Teams, how to quickly deploy Teams, what the department mapping looks like and how you allocate and structure your teams, how to manage governance alongside all of this as well, with data moving into the cloud. Some quick tips. Then we've got some remote workplace workshops that we can deliver, as well as Q&A. So just some quick introductions to myself and Hugh, who's delivering this workshop alongside me. So we've got myself. I've been with Circle IT for 13+ years. I've come from a technical and managerial background, and I now focus purely on our Microsoft service within the business. And we've also got Hugh Valentine, who's delivering the demonstration of the webinar for Teams today, who is the CEO of Valto. And the relationship between Circle IT and Valto has been established for more than 4 years, where we deliver a lot of our 365 services with the capabilities of them as a trusted, valued partner.
Thank you, Mark. Hello, everybody. Looking forward to the session today.
So just a little bit more about Circle IT. We're a value-added reseller and managed services provider based in Cardiff. We're 17 years old. We've got just upwards of 80 staff now, and fully owned by individuals within Circle IT. And we've just hit the 15 million revenue turnover mark as of this year. And a lot of that is actually from our 4.5 million recurring revenue services, which is all driven off Microsoft services as well as managed support. But we've been going an awfully long time, and Microsoft is a very key core pillar within our business at this moment in time, and will be for the foreseeable future. And just to touch on some of the relationships on where we've delivered a lot of projects, we have customers ranging from public sector, private sector, and third sector as well, where we've delivered a lot of 365 services as well as infrastructure projects for them. And with a lot of these customers, we do build up valued partnerships with them, as opposed to being a traditional box shifter in that sense. So we do take that into consideration with a lot of our relationship building. So first and foremost, with Microsoft Teams. Microsoft Teams is a modern workplace collaboration tool set. And to get started with this, a lot of organizations may already have Office licensing or Microsoft 365 licensing. And Office 365 and Microsoft 365 will include Teams by default. So it will be down to your organization to enable access to these services. There is currently an offer from Microsoft where they will provide 50 free licenses of E1 for 6 months, which will enable smaller organizations to get started with these collaboration tool sets so that you can deliver remote working capabilities and collaboration under this license type. And it's very simple to set up to get going with this. So it doesn't require an awful lot of overhead in order to get set up to use this right from day one. And that offer's there to encourage people to be able to utilize these modern tool sets as opposed to traditional workplace environments that may require VPNs or access to servers back in head office, which typically prohibits the collaboration and remote working capabilities available to organizations. In addition to E1 licenses and the licenses that you'll have within Office 365 and Microsoft 365, there's the ability to conduct audio conferencing as well as business voice. So if you need to host meetings for a lot of your teams, which I'm sure you will need to do over the next 6 months or so, the audio conferencing side of things will be key. So for within Microsoft Teams, you have the capability of conducting conferences free of charge. But if you want the dial-in capabilities for people to dial in via phone, then you will need to add additional licenses to achieve that. And all it is adding additional licenses at this point, which changes the delivery mechanism of these types of projects, whereas traditionally you would need to buy additional hardware to enable these services, but audio conferencing can be enabled just through adding a license. And similarly with business voice. So what is Microsoft Teams? We will cover this off in a short demonstration, but it's a tool set provided by Microsoft that brings all of the services together that are within the Office 365 and Microsoft 365 portfolio, which enables chat and instant messaging, team working and collaboration, calendar, calls, activities, anything that is in that Office 365 ecosystem can be integrated into Microsoft Teams. So on that note, I'm going to hand you over to Hugh, who will now run a demonstration of Microsoft Teams, and we will be taking questions throughout this, and we will play them back at the end of this webinar.
Thank you, Mark. I'm just going to jump over to sharing my screen. So the whole idea of Microsoft Teams, as Mark mentioned at the beginning, it is a modern communication platform. So the easiest way to show you how it works is to just jump in the platform and give you some examples of the features and functionality that's available. So down the left-hand side, there's a number of different tabs, and we'll cover off the different tabs that are available and explain some of the features and functions. The very first one is the chat tab. So anybody that's used Skype for Business in the organization, this basically is a direct replacement for Skype for Business. And many organizations who are currently using Skype for Business in the cloud in Office 365, that will be migrated and transitioned over to Microsoft Teams in the very near future. Now, the whole concept of the chat is to basically send individual chats to people either in your organization or to people externally. So you can also chat to people that are outside of the organization. Perhaps they're using Skype for Business or they're using Microsoft Teams. And we're able to basically start a communication with those people. So I've got Steve here. I'm able to send Steve a message. So I can say, hello, Steve, how are you doing? And that will basically then send him over a message and he'll receive that on all of his devices. Now, Teams works best when it's set up on all of the different devices. So we would really recommend that you get Teams on your mobile phone, your tablet, your PC, your Mac, and basically the whole idea is to be able to be contactable no matter what device you're on. So I've sent Steve a message over here saying, hello, Steve, how are you doing? Within the chat, I can also video chat Steve. So very useful in the current climate. I can just jump on a quick video call with him. And I can also do an audio call as well. The other functionality is the screen sharing. So that's how we're running the webinar today. So that's a very powerful functionality that perhaps if you're working on a document and you want to share your screen and get some help, that is very, very powerful. There's some additional features that are over and above Skype for Business. So one in here is this exclamation mark, and that allows me to send an important message. So that'll flag it up as an important one. I can say, hello, I need some help. And it's immediately clear to Steve then that that's important and it's flagged up. And then another one, which can be a bit annoying potentially, is the urgent one. So this basically would message Steve every 2 minutes for 20 minutes, and it will continually notify him. So if you really need some help, that's the one that you could use for that. The advantage that Teams has over Skype is all of the history of the communications are basically scrollable as well. So one of the limitations with Skype is really difficult to get that conversation history back, whereas with this it's easy to see what's going on. And then we've got some more interactive media as well. So I can hit like on the messages here, or I can start to send GIFs and stuff as well if I wanted to get his attention, so I could look for a help GIF. So this is all about having a bit of fun as well. It's not just a work platform. The people that are in this remote environment and remote working, it's definitely a good tool to start having a bit of fun, light-hearted conversations, that kind of thing as well. So that's the chat, basically replaces Skype for Business. The second piece we have is the Microsoft Teams. So this is the main driver and the main functionality of the platform. So every team that you're a member of will appear down the left-hand side. So you can see I've got several teams available to me here. We see Teams working really well for three main areas. The first one is a departmental area. So we can create a team and we can invite everyone into that department, into the team, and then use that as a collaboration space. So given the current climate, a lot of you are probably, or maybe even all of you now, are working from home. You would definitely want to look at creating a team for your department, and that will then enable people to start communicating as a department instead of those conversations that they might be having around the desk. We can start to use this team as a way of communicating. Teams also works really well if we create one for projects. So obviously there can be a project that involves multiple people. So if we want to bring in people that are in different departments to work on a project, we can create a team and we can invite multiple people into that. As part of this, we can also invite someone external as well. So given that you're working with customers and suppliers and they're probably working from home at the moment, we could perhaps create a team that's externally shared as well. So if you're working on a project, you could invite your customers or suppliers completely free, and they will be able to use all the functionality that I'm going to show now. So very, very powerful getting people working remotely. And the final area that we see a team working really well is to create a company-wide team. So at the moment, there'll be lots of announcements, there'll be conversations that people have, and if we look at emails and replacing those, people send emails like, I'm doing a marathon at the weekend, or I'm raising money for this, or in the current climate, you might want to just put announcements about how you're going to work remotely. So a company-wide team is a really good way of fostering that social engagement and start to have some conversations, because that's something that's definitely going to be lacking with people working from home. The next piece of functionality is the channels down the left-hand side. So the channels basically allow us to see basically split a team up. So every team by default has the general tab. The channels basically allow us to break the communication up. So I can see here I've got the finance team. I have the general one, which everyone has access to, but I can also create a channel for different segments within that department. So I can basically say, I've got accounting, I've got salary, I've got that kind of thing. Now, the whole concept of Teams basically is to replace internal email. So within here, I can say, I'm going to replace the internal email. So I can tag the team. So by typing the word @team, I can say, are the expenses reports working? And that basically, by tagging @team, every single person who's in the finance team will get a pop-up notification. So that means that they'll be able to see it on their mobile phone, they'll see it on their PC. It works just like sending an email to everybody. If I wanted to just get one or two members of people in the team, I can type in @Chris as an example, and I could type in @Dougie, and I could say, I'm working on month end, where are you up to? So only Chris and Dougie are going to get the pop-up notifications, but everybody in the finance team will be able to see that message. So this is a good way. I only need Chris and Dougie to be distracted, but it also means that if someone else in the team also wants to chase Chris and Dougie on month end, they can come in here and say, yeah, I need that as well. So they could just say, I need this info too. So the whole idea of Teams is to keep the whole team aware. So even though we only need Chris and Dougie for now, the rest of the team is aware of what's going on within there. The final thing is I can just post general information. So if I didn't tag anybody in here, I could say COVID-19 update. We are still working from home this week. Now, by not tagging anyone, that's kind of not an important message. It's kind of just for informational purposes only. It's not to distract people's workday. It's just to say there's a message here I want you to see. So just to cap the app team is if we need to get everybody's attention. The tagging individuals is good to just get 1 or 2 members of the team, but keep everyone aware of what's going on. And then the not tagging at all is good just for information. So perhaps it's not critical or urgent, but it's a good way of sharing information. The next part of Teams is basically the threads. So I've created 3 separate threads here. A common mistake that people make when they're using Teams is they might just reply here. So if I was replying to month end, I could say I'm working on it. And what that has actually done is create a brand new thread at the bottom. So if we treat it as if it's WhatsApp, which is just a message after message after message, it means then it's very difficult to keep track of what's actually going on in those conversations. And because we want to work effectively, the whole concept is to reply within these threads. So we can come into this, our expenses report's working. I can say, yes, they are now, there was an issue. Or I can then reply into the month end one. So the threads basically mean then it's very easy to track communications and conversations and what's going on. Within a team, I can hit this little A icon. That enables me basically to create a subject. So a new bar has popped up here and I could say month end reporting. I could tag the entire team and say, can we all have an update on this today, please? And I could even then start to craft a message. So by hitting the A here, that allows me to build a message up and I can start to post messages and build a more structured message then. And you'll also see, because I've made it as a subject, it's even then bolded and very easy to navigate. So that's kind of the first part of Microsoft Teams. It's this conversations ability. We can also within here hit the video icon and we can start a video communication with different people. So I can hit this meet now and I would then be able to drag in all of the members of the finance team onto the meeting. So the meet now basically is a very good way of, as an example of a process that we follow, and we've been following it for a very long time. We're all used to working from home and working remotely. As a team, at the start of every day at 8:30, we'll start with a thread, which we'll create, which can be used to capture daily communications. We'll then start with a meet now, and we'll drag everybody into that team. And the idea of this morning team is basically a 15-minute update with everybody in the team, and it's basically a catch-up. So did you have a good evening? What's your plan today? Have you got any issues that I can help with? And by doing that, it starts to frame people when they're working from home in the mindset of, yep, I'm working, I've now got where I'm going. It's put people in the right mindset to basically continue with the day. So we see using Microsoft Teams to start a daily morning call, gets everyone going, puts them in the right mindset, and then we can start to use Teams effectively. Using this Meet Now functionality as well, we recommend perhaps investigating whether you could do one at lunchtime. Again, people are going to be stuck at home, probably thinking of cabin fever, they'll be socially isolated. So by having the Meet Now and doing regular catch-ups, we could perhaps bring the team in or a subsection of the team in at lunchtime and just have some social time and a catch-up. And then finally, at the very end of the day, it's a very good time then, perhaps for another 10, 15 minutes to just basically recap how the day's gone. Is there any issues? Does anyone need any help? So that's really how we promote using Teams to get people working effectively. It's using this Meet Now functionality and starting to impose regular sessions where people feel as if they're working and feel as if they're part of the team. The next part of Teams is the files section. So it is possible to move your files into this structure. So if you have network drives and perhaps you're using legacy Dropbox or SharePoint or that kind of thing, it is possible to move those files over. So you can see here I've got a folder structure. I'm able to hit the sync button. And what that does is it creates a copy of those files on my PC. So I can go into my folders here, and I've got a folder there called Demo Finance. And that basically means I can access my folders in a very traditional network drive view via Windows Explorer. Once I've synced those files, it means that I've got a copy of them offline. So people that are working from home, if you're struggling with a poor internet connection, this sync button might enable you to take a copy of those files so you can work on them offline while you're trying to arrange your internet speeds. This is also very good if you're on the move. So if you were traveling, if you're on the train in the future, as an example, the syncing basically allows you to take a copy of those files and work on them when you're on the train, that kind of thing. And when you do get an internet connection, it automatically synchronizes and pushes those changes up. By having the files in Teams, the final piece of functionality is that we get basically the ability to share those files. So if I wanted to drag in people from outside of the team, I might want to bring in someone outside of finance into this Excel file. I can hit the share file and I can then share that file with people outside of the department. And really the final thing that's really powerful around this for remote working is everybody who opens this file in Microsoft Teams will all be able to work on and edit this file together. So I would be able to make changes to this section, while another one of my co-workers would be able to make a change to this section at the same time. And by everyone who joins and opens this file will show up in the top right-hand corner where I've got my picture just here. So the files functionality is very, very powerful. If you still have a network drive, you're probably struggling with VPNs and connectivity that way. So it might be a good idea to move your key files into Teams in the interim period, and that will enable you then to start basically collaborating and bringing multiple people into this platform. The posts, the conversations, and the files work very well together. So if I was working on a file like the rota planning, I could say in here, at KPI reports, I can tag the team and I can say, can I get feedback on this, please? So remember, by tagging the team via @team, it's going to post a message to everyone. I can hit this little paperclip icon at the bottom, and I can then choose the browse teams and channels. And this shows me all of the finance files, and I can look for that KPI reports file and choose share a link. When I do that, it basically then allows me to click on the file. So on the left-hand side, I can open the file and I can make changes to it, and I can update this and add more information. But on the right-hand side, I can say, right, at Chris, this doesn't look right. Can you check row 2? At Dougie, can you look at, and so on and so forth. But it basically means this is a much quicker way of collaborating and communicating rather than sending emails back and forth, having calls. It means I've got a live copy of the document on the left-hand side, and I'm able to quickly provide communications on the right-hand side. And using that video functionality, you remember I could hit this video chat and I could drag Chris and Dougie into a quick conversation. We could discuss the file, and then we can move on to the next section. So the video functionality and collaboration with this is very, very good, and it basically would enable us to start a video chat with those members and have a quick chat. So that kind of fills in the gaps where you might just get up from your desk and go talk to someone. You can now just hit the meet now, drag the people in, and you can even record that session as well if you want to. So that's kind of the conversations and the files. The next thing we can do with Teams is we have the ability to pin different tabs. So as an example, I've got a Wiki tab here. So you can think of the Wiki tab as an internal knowledge base for your department. So within here, you can see I've got procedures, and we're updating things like how to update Sage, how to access payroll, and we've got some guides in there. So if you've got people that are now working from home, it can be a very good place to start to put some information and help them through that process. We've also got policies, and we got some sections on there. So this knowledge base, you can expand and make it very easy to search and find the information you're looking for. If I hit the Add Tab option in the top right-hand corner, I can add lots of different tabs to different systems. So within here, I'm able to add, as an example, the Planner tab. So the Planner tab is a very, very good tool. Anybody that's used Trello in the past, this will look familiar. So Trello, it's a planner basically is a task management system. So again, if you're working from home and you've got your teams working from home and you need a way to start distributing tasks and allocating and tracking how people are getting on with things, we can use the planner section to basically build lists of tasks in here. So you can see the way it works is I've got different buckets. So a bucket could be whatever you want, really. It could be a department, it could be a subsection of a department, it could be a phase in a project. And then within each of the buckets, I'm then able to create a task. So I could say, right, we're going to do payroll. I can assign a due date at the end of the month, and I could then assign it to someone in that team. So I could say, right, well, Kyle's going to work on this task here. And I can then hit add task. Once the task's been created, we can flesh that task out. So if payroll means looking at PAYE, creating a report, I can then add those different tasks onto the card. And then I could basically come in here and Kyle can then say, I've done that, I've done that. And if he was then wanting to move it to a different section, they can be dragged and dropped to different sections as well until it's finally complete. So think about using this as a way of perhaps managing the tasks that people are working on and trying to build a way of working remotely. This can be a very good way of doing that. We can have lots of other tabs. So if there's an Excel spreadsheet that you use all the time, so I've got an example of a basic rotor here, which is just a very simple Excel rotor, but I've pinned that to the tabs at the top. So it means then people don't have to hunt around to find the information. They're able to come in here and add comments and whatever on there as well. And then we can add lots of other tabs. So I won't go into every single tab that's available, but as an example, we've got an expenses app, which is an app that we've developed in Power Apps that would allow people to submit expenses. This is probably something we'll cover off in more detail in one of the further webinars that we do. And we also have this retail analysis sample. So for organizations that out there that are using Power BI, we're able to bring in a Power BI report onto this as well. So think of Teams as basically the central dashboard. Every day people would open Microsoft Teams and they would then use these tabs as a department to work day in, day out. So pretty much everyone will have this open and work from here. Back on the channels then, if we've got a big department, if finance comprises of 50 people, then this general tab might be very, very busy. So you might find that the conversations are overwhelming and there's too much going on. If that is the case, we can add a channel. And a channel basically splits the communications up. So if I go into this payroll channel, you can see here that there's some conversations, and basically a channel provides a separate post, a separate files, and you can then build your tabs up in here as well. So if within the finance team, you want to just say, right, only people from payroll, we can have that set up within here. We can also create a private channel as well. So this one here with a little padlock indicates that only certain members of the finance team have access to it. So we've created one for salary. That has the conversation, so we can discuss things like people's salaries, knowing that not everybody in finance can see it, but also it creates a restricted files area as well. So that means that people can then go into this files and only the people within that channel can view it. So it's a very secure way of having a subsection within each department. So I would recommend moving forward, if you're not using Teams already, or you've already started to use Teams, that you consider looking at the departments, create one for each department and each project that you're working on, and then have a think around how they're going to use that. So what channels are going to be created, what tabs should be created, and can we use things like the wiki and stuff to help them find information that they might be struggling with. So that's a kind of overview of Microsoft Teams, the Teams tab. The next tab that we have here is the Calendar tab. So the Calendar tab is simply a link to your Outlook calendar. So all this will do is show your events from your Outlook calendar. There's nothing in here that you need to worry too much about. But what we can do with Teams is if we need to set up a meeting within Outlook itself, we have the ability here to choose new Teams meeting. And what that does is it creates a new Teams meeting, and it then enables people to join that Teams meeting either via this link, or as Mark mentioned earlier in the presentation, we can purchase an add-on, which basically allows people to dial into the team as well. So if you wanted your customers or suppliers, or perhaps even your staff, to dial in via a phone, we can add this phone capability for £3 per user per month, and it is discounted for charities and schools as well. So within here, we've got the calendar functionality, and that just basically allows us to set up a meeting. One other thing that can be quite useful is we can enable live events. So that's exactly what we're doing now. A live event is good for doing webinars. It could also be good if you have a very large organization and you're currently used to doing announcements. Perhaps you go to your canteen and the CEO might make an announcement there about the upcoming changes or what's going on. You can actually use these live events as an internal way of basically communicating. So everybody's joined today, they can see the Q&A functionality and they can see that I'm presenting my screen and doing a video. So if you needed to do this for your organization, you're looking to perhaps doing an org-wide announcement where you want to get feedback, you can consider using the live events as a way of doing that. And perhaps if you want to do webinars for your clients, then you can also do those as well. So the live event is a very good piece of functionality. The next piece really is the Callin. So this can be enabled as a full phone system. So we can come into this platform and we can send and receive calls. So this does require an additional license, which is something that we'll cover off at the end. But if you're struggling with a legacy phone system and you're not able to access that on the move, the Callin functionality can be a way to enable Microsoft Teams to send and receive calls. The other tabs. So files basically is just a very simple list of the files that you've been working on. And the activity is a good way of seeing what people are working on and go into different chats and stuff. So within here, we're able to go to the chat and we can see conversations and messages that people have sent. So I can mark this message as unread, which means I can basically mark in an email as unread, which means I can go back and find it afterwards. I can search in the top. So in here, if I wanted to search for a message, I could search for test, and that'll bring back all of the messages where test has been mentioned. And then I can do things like filter. So if I wanted to filter who it was from, I could search for somebody's name, and that'll filter then the messages where test's been flagged up. So the kind of activity and the searching is a very, very good way of being able to find messages that you've been mentioned in. And another cool thing is you can search for org, and if that's been set up, you're able to look at the org chart of your organization and see where you fit as well. So that's kind of an overview of Microsoft Teams. As I mentioned at the beginning, I would consider what teams you need. If you've got departments working from home at the moment, very much creating a department team would be a good idea. Creating a project team would also work, and also consider creating a company-wide team. So some of the things that I can do that enable a bit of fun in here is I've got, for example, the GIFs. So if you do have a new starter joining, I could do a post in here to say new starter, welcome Dave, and I could tag it the whole company to say, please welcome Dave. And then everyone in the company would then be able to start to message on there and hit like and say welcome. And they can do things like post GIFs. So there's the fun part of this is it's not all just about work, but they can start to search for GIFs and we can start to have a bit of fun in there. And we can also use things like praise as well. So if someone's done a good job, we can hit the praise option at the bottom and we can then start to say, right, team player, and we could tag someone to say, great job, Chris, for helping us today. So as well as obviously the bits I've been showing you for posts and files, really consider having a company-wide one and trying to instill some of the fun components of Teams. Don't just use it as a work tool. People will feel, like I mentioned before, they're going to have cabin fever, they're going to want to get out, they want to socialize. So we can use things like the praise functionality and the GIF, and we can start to have a bit of fun going around the organization using Microsoft Teams as well. So that's an overview of the Microsoft Teams platform. We'll now jump into sort of a few tips and tricks that you guys can start to deploy. So the first one is if you guys are looking to very quickly deploy Microsoft Teams in your organization, there's some ideas around here that we'd recommend that you look at. So the first one is check the settings in the Teams admin center. So there's a lot of settings in the admin center that it's probably worth having a cursory glance over just to make sure that you're set up in the way you'd want to be. So things like external sharing, do you want that enabled or do you want that disabled? So obviously we can help you with that. You can get in touch with us and we can go through those settings, but also it's just worth making sure that if you are going through Teams and rolling that out, have a glance through the settings and make sure that they're configured in the way you want. Deploy on all devices. So really to get the most out of Teams, and this works best when we are a mobile workforce, but it's really a good idea to get Teams set up on your mobile phone, your tablet, all of your different devices. And that means you can do things like reply to messages, you can join meetings all from your phone. So you don't have to have a laptop. You can do a lot of this from your phone as well and use your phone's hardware. So perhaps if at the moment you don't have a good headset, you could use the camera and the audio on your phone, and that'll enable you then to do video chats. So there is a shortage on web cameras and headsets at the moment, so that's a good way of getting that going. If you can, provide hardware for your staff. So obviously having the video chat and having the headsets for people is a really good way of getting them involved. Being able to see your colleagues is really helpful. We'd recommend to train your users. So obviously if you're going away today, we would recommend that you train your users up and say, this is how you use Teams, this is how you use the tagging, this is how we set up a team, that kind of thing. Don't just let people find their own way. Give them the video of this afterwards to give them some guidance and help. Guide your users. So this basically is, don't just let people find their own way with Teams. As I mentioned at the beginning, let's consider setting up a team for them. Explain how they can use the functionality. So explain that the video chat would be a good way of catching up in the morning at the end of the day. Think about breaking the departments up into different sections. Something that we find works really well is building what we call a cheat sheet for organizations. So this is a very simplified example of a cheat sheet. But basically what we've done is we've mapped that company and that department to a Microsoft Teams way of working. So like I said, don't let people find their own way with Microsoft Teams. It's obviously a good way, but we want to accelerate that. We want to get people working from home effectively. So to do that, a cheat sheet basically says, right, what are we going to use Teams for? We're going to use them for departments and projects. We're then going to use the channels within that team and perhaps map it out with the department you're working with to say, right, finance is broken up into payroll. Explain to them clearly that daily catch-ups can be done using Teams. So my example, I said, call at the start of the day, the middle of the day, and the end of the day. Just outline that to the departments when you're rolling this out, just to say, this is how you use it effectively. Get on a call with people. If you do a weekly catch-up, perhaps make this one a more detailed catch-up. The daily catch-up could be 10-15 minutes every morning. A weekly catch-up might be set for an hour, and you can go into projects and how things are going. And we could record that session so people that couldn't join the session are able to play it back and catch up, and that saves duplication of repeating yourself. We try and say a very clear objective. So for us, replace internal emails. So let's stop sending emails. They're very inefficient for internal communications. It means that you've got lots of back and forth. If you haven't looped the correct person in on an email, you'll then have to loop them in. Teams is very simple, and we can tag people, we can drag the people in. So let's look at replacing internal emails with this platform. And then some other pieces around basically trying to maximize the tabs, getting some headsets and devices. So consider building these cheat sheets for your organizations and your departments so that people really get a jump start with using the platform. Use a specialist. So again, at the end of this, we would recommend perhaps if you're trying to jump start your Teams deployment and get going really quickly, a specialist can really help you with that because they'll know the settings, they'll know how to get you going, they can provide training in the right areas. So I covered this. This is the map departments to remote working. So look at the cheat sheet, look at the daily catch-ups, and basically build one of these sheets for your departments. The next piece is just around the governance. So ideally, as part of a Teams project, we would be looking at putting a governance model in place, but a lot of organizations are scrambling to get to Microsoft Teams now as quickly as they can. But there is some key areas in here that you will need to consider as part of the rollout. So the first one, as I mentioned, is the team settings. So you will want to go into the admin center of Microsoft Teams, and you'll want to make sure those settings are adhering with your company's policies. So if you don't want external sharing, you wouldn't want your external sharing enabled in Microsoft Teams. So once you've got it going, make sure you've got some tasks basically to go into this admin center and look through the settings that are available. Of particular interest are org-wide settings, where we have things like external access and we have guest access. So you just want to make sure that all of these settings are configured in a way that your company would be happy with. The second piece is security. And again, we'll cover security in more detail in further webinars. But obviously, there are products such as EM&S and conditional access that should be put in place, including MFA, multi-factor authentication, to make sure that people can't access Teams if a password's breached. So the security is still something you need to consider. So get Teams going, but make sure the security is considered afterwards. And then obviously adoption, getting people to use it. So things like the department checklists are really important. Having the training sessions, so start getting training sessions in your organizations. Use the knowledge from today's webinar or look at getting some more training sessions, but try and get people using it. Explain the functionality, the tagging, the channels, so everybody's aware, and that will increase the adoption. And obviously look at the devices. If we can, give people stuff that they can work from home effectively. So get them a headset, get them a web camera so they feel like they're part of the office. Microsoft Teams telephony, we briefly went over this. So anybody that's looking for a phone system, we're going to do another webinar. The next webinar in the series is going to go into a lot more detail on this, but there is a phone system available. It is around £12 a user a month, and that will give your company a full phone system with the capability of sending and receiving external calls. And also it will provide the audio conferencing, allowing people to dial into a Microsoft Teams meeting. So if you're struggling with your phone system at the moment, this is an answer for that and might help you with the current situation. So really, to wrap up, some quick tips. So the tips that we found working most effectively with the organizations we worked with are convert your departments to remote working. So I'm going to reiterate it again, but building these department cheat sheets is a really effective way of getting people working remotely. At the moment, people will be finding their feet. They'll be figuring out the best way to use Teams. A department cheat sheet will really light up their ability and drive the adoption of this platform. It'll mean they don't find their own way with it, but they've got a clearly mapped out way to say, yes, this is how we work remotely, and just spell it out for people on how they should use this platform going forward. The next one is take breaks and be healthy. So it's really easy if you're working from home just to sit at your desk from 8:30 till 6 every day and not even take a proper break. So it's really important that now we're working from home a lot more, that you're taking regular breaks. Perhaps make sure at lunchtime you're getting up, you're taking the dog for a walk, you're going out for a period of time. Don't just sit at your desk all day and work away, because it's not going to be a healthy environment for you to work in. And also consider taking breaks with your colleagues. So if you're, again, when we're in the office, it's easy to take a 5-minute break and have a coffee with someone. Well, you're working from home, we find just to have an ad hoc communication. Like I said, we do a lunchtime catch up every day for about 15 minutes where everyone in the team just joins a video call and we just talk around social components, and it's just taking a break from being in work all the time. Obviously use Microsoft Teams effectively. So using the video sharing, the tagging, replace internal emails. So if we can get Teams working properly, that's a really fantastic tool for remote working. That kind of leads on to the use Microsoft 365 effectively. So Teams is just one portion of the whole platform. There's lots of other useful tools in there, like Planner, which will enable you to do task management. There's a really cool product called To Do, which I like, which basically is built into 365, and it enables you to plan your own to-do list. So you're able to create lists of stuff you need to work on, and you can then create the My Day. So you can right-click on a task and add it to My Day. And that basically means that when I'm working on a checklist, I've got a nice, easy to follow list to say, right, I've done that, and work through it. So there's lots of tools in Microsoft 365, not just Teams. We can look at SharePoint, Planner, To Do, Stream. All of these can help you with this working from home. And if you're not using those at the moment, it's definitely worth investigating what you can do with those. The final piece is promote social and fun. So I've said this a few times. It can be easy just to focus 100% on work through this platform, but you've got to think about people's social well-being, and let's just think about using it for fun. Get some light-hearted conversations in there, post some general news, and have a bit of fun while you're working from home as well. So I'll now hand over back to my colleague, Mark, who's going to talk about some of the remote workshops that are coming up.
That's great. Thank you very much for that overview, Hugh. And hopefully everyone's found that information useful given the current climate of remote working, particularly with the tool sets that's available at your disposal within Microsoft Teams. So one thing I want to cover off before we go into the remote workshops, and what Hugh's alluded to as well, in order to get access to some of these free trials or even setup of a new Office 365 environment, if you're not using that at the moment, that is something that we can undertake on your behalf to get that set up free of charge and just give you some quick and easy access. As Hugh mentioned, we are having a lot of conversations with a fair few customers and even people that aren't customers around setting up brand new tenancies to enable them to continue working remotely where possible. So if that's something you're interested in, then please get in touch. But one of the items that we are looking at to deliver off the back of this, clearly we're not able to visit a lot of customer sites at the moment, given the current situation we find ourselves in. So what we're looking to do is to provide a fair amount of remote workshops covering various different topics. And these topics aren't just what is shown on screen at the moment. They can vary across all of the Microsoft 365 ecosystem and even beyond that into traditional networking, server storage, virtualization, etc. But what we're aiming to do with this is to deliver these virtually via Microsoft Teams and through a very interactive means, so that they aren't a one-way webinar such as this. We are aiming to deliver these workshops around things like Teams adoption, Microsoft 365 and modern workplace, where we go into a lot more detail around how these tool sets can aid and assist the users within your organizations, how you secure those environments as well. So going into the details of the tool sets available within the Microsoft 365 license type that is there as part of your purchase already that probably hasn't been enabled, particularly given that people are now having to resort to using their personal devices. So how do you secure the information that is on those systems outside of the traditional methods? And similarly, now that you may not have access to your office or can't go into it as often as you'd like, it's trying to understand how Microsoft Azure can assist with those systems as well, whereby Microsoft are managing those data centers on your behalf. So how can you leverage public cloud environments? So what we'd like to do today is, obviously, if you are interested in learning more about these, we deliver these workshops remotely. So please visit the URL, which is circleit.co.uk/feedback form. And just to reiterate on some of the further events that we'll be conducting in this webinar series, the next one will be next Tuesday at 10 AM, which is all around business voice. So again, at this moment in time, a lot of organizations will have traditional phone systems where they need access to the office in order to make outbound calls and receive the inbound calls. Therefore, we're conducting this webinar to give you an idea of what services and features are available within the Microsoft ecosystem to enable that functionality. So, I'd like to thank you all once again for joining. We do have a couple of questions that we've got here, which we'll throw over now. And we'll probably need some participation from you on this as well, Hugh. So if we start off on the first one from Amber, what is the best way of arranging rotas in Microsoft Teams?
So it all depends, really. I mean, I showed an example in the demonstration of being able to simply pin an Excel sheet. So if you already have an Excel spreadsheet that you're using for rotas, that can be really a quick win. You could just pin Microsoft Teams Excel tab to the very top and start to use it. If you're looking for a more comprehensive system, there is a product that's included as part of Microsoft Teams called Shifts, and that basically can be used to manage shifts. So it can be used for swapping shifts, it can be used for allocating shifts to different people. So I think that would warrant a separate conversation if you wanted to see that functionality and how that works.
Yeah, and just reach out to us on that basis if you want any more details on that, Amber. And just a general comment for this as well, from a question that Mary raised: can staff who missed the webinar view a recording? Absolutely, we'll be sending out the link to this webinar post the event for all attendees, so that you can distribute that amongst your colleagues. Another question from Tim, actually there are two. Are the chat messages streams stored for legal purposes?
So all of the messages that exist in Microsoft Teams, we can apply retention and legal hold to. So we can apply a retention label to Microsoft Teams if you need to keep them, and that will enable you to say, right, we need to protect these messages for 5 years to stop people from deleting them, and obviously then be able to pull those back. And also similarly, you could use it to purge messages. So if you didn't want to keep messages in Teams for longer than 60 days, we could use a retention label just to purge that information out.
Thank you. And what are the arguments about reducing internal emails? So I mean, I've got a take on that at the moment as well. I mean, given the current climate that we're in, for me, having used Teams since it came out, it's been a bit of a change in dynamic of working. Whereas email is very kind of one-way communication. It is a fire and forget mentality, whereby we've all probably been guilty of it, where you just want to try and clear your inbox, so you'll send something quickly and expect an answer maybe within 24, 48 hours, but you know it's off your to-do list. Microsoft Teams is a much more collaborative approach in facilitating those types of conversations. So the concept of inner and outer loop communications that Microsoft has come up with is that Teams is there predominantly for what's classed as your inner loop communication, so people that you work with on a day-to-day basis and for projects. And that will get you the best return through the collaboration. An email is your kind of information-only type messages or external communication. That's not to say that Teams can't be used to collaborate with external parties, because it very much can, but that's kind of my take on it, is that it's a very more inclusive way of working as opposed to email.
Yep. Just to one thing, I would send a challenge to yourself as well. We've done this with a lot of organizations, is say, let's use Microsoft Teams as a department for a week and basically enforce that we don't send internal emails. And by the end of that week, make a judgment call as were emails better or was Microsoft Teams better? And every single time an organization has said that they would never go back to the previous way of working. So it's just more effective, more collaborative, and it's a modern way of communicating.
And a question from Luke: are Teams meetings closed, or can anyone within the organization invite themselves to meetings?
If they have the link, they would be able to join that Teams invite. So you can have a lobby where you can reject people from joining. So if someone was to obtain the Teams link and they clicked on it, they could join. And if you have the lobby functionality enabled, you could then kick that person out, so they wouldn't be able to participate in the meeting until they've been accepted by the meeting owner.
I think just to add a different connotation to that as well, if the word meetings in that question wasn't the right word to use, people can invite themselves to Teams or within Microsoft Teams if they're public Teams. So therefore, they'll be available for anyone in the organization to join. So you may have something there for information and governance that is generally information available to everybody within the organization. At that point, that team is public, that people can invite themselves to. If there's a department team, for example, HR, then that would have a set list of people and would be classed as a private team. Therefore, they wouldn't be able to invite themselves to that team. So,
and I think that's it for the questions.
It is. So I'd like to take this opportunity to thank, thanks you for presenting on that, and thanks everybody for their attendance today. We will be sending out a meeting, a link to this meeting post the event, which will be done via email for all attendees. And please feel free to disseminate that link to the rest of your colleagues to understand how they can better utilize Team to effectively work remotely. And if you need anything else from us here, please reach out to us via our website. If you can go to circlit.co.uk/feedback-form, we'd like to hear from you around how we can help. So on that note, thank you very much. Stay safe and hopefully speak to you soon.
Thank you, everyone. See you.